Marcus Wellington walked through the busy airport with his leather briefcase in one hand and his phone in the other. He had made this trip dozens of times before. London was calling, and he had an important business meeting scheduled for the next morning. The airport was crowded as usual, with families rushing to their gates and business travelers checking their watches. He reached Gate 47 with plenty of time to spare. His first-class ticket was safely stored in his phone, and his passport was in his jacket pocket. Marcus had built his technology company from nothing, working day and night for 15 years. Now his company was worth billions, and he was known around the world. But right now, he was just another passenger trying to catch a flight. The boarding process had already started. Marcus joined the line for first-class passengers. There were only 3 people ahead of him. He watched as they scanned their boarding passes and walked down the jet bridge without any problems. When it was his turn, he stepped forward with a friendly smile. The flight attendant at the gate was a woman in her 40s with blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her name tag read Karen Mitchell. She looked up at Marcus and something changed in her expression. Her smile disappeared. "Boarding pass," she said in a flat voice. Marcus held up his phone, showing the digital boarding pass on the screen. Karen looked at it for a long moment, then shook her head. "I'm sorry, but this seat has been reassigned," she said. Marcus was confused. "Reassigned? I booked this seat 3 weeks ago. There must be some mistake." "The flight is overbooked," Karen replied, not meeting his eyes. "You'll need to speak with customer service about getting on a different flight." "But I'm looking at my valid boarding pass right now," Marcus said, keeping his voice calm and polite. "Can you check your system again? My name is Marcus Wellington." Karen didn't check anything. She just waved her hand dismissively. "Sir, I've already told you. The seat has been given away. You need to step aside. You're holding up the line." Marcus looked behind him. There was no line. In fact, while they were talking, 2 more passengers had walked up to the other podium where another gate agent was working. Both of those passengers were white men in business suits. They scanned their passes and boarded without a single question. "Excuse me," Marcus said, "but I arrived before those gentlemen, and they just boarded. My boarding pass is valid for this flight, this date, and this time. Can you please explain what the problem is?" Karen's face turned red. "Sir, I need you to step away from the gate right now. You're causing a scene." "I'm not causing anything," Marcus said, still speaking in a calm, respectful tone. "I'm a paying passenger with a confirmed first-class ticket. I just want to understand why I can't board." Other passengers were starting to notice now. A few people had their phones out, though Marcus couldn't tell if they were checking messages or recording. An elderly white woman who had been sitting near the gate stood up and walked over. "Excuse me," the woman said to Karen. "I've been sitting here for 20 minutes, and I saw this gentleman arrive before several other people who you just let through. Why are you giving him such a hard time?" Karen ignored her completely. She pressed a button on her radio. "I need security at Gate 47. I have an uncooperative passenger." Marcus felt his heart sink. This was really happening. He had faced discrimination before, of course. Despite his success and wealth, he was still a black man in America. But it had been a long time since something this blatant had occurred, especially in such a public setting. "Ma'am, I don't think security is necessary," Marcus said. "I'm happy to wait while you verify my reservation." "I'm not being uncooperative. I'm simply trying to board a flight that I paid for." "You need to step back," Karen said, her voice getting louder. "I've asked you nicely multiple times and you're refusing to comply." A young man in his 20s, wearing a college sweatshirt, spoke up from nearby. "Lady, he's been nothing but polite. You're the one being aggressive, and I've been recording this whole thing." Karen's eyes flashed with anger. "You need to put that phone away right now or I'll have you removed from this flight too." More passengers gathered around. A woman with 2 small children looked concerned. A businessman in an expensive suit stopped and watched. 3 college students stood together, all of them holding their phones up. Marcus took a deep breath. He knew that if he showed any anger or frustration, it would be used against him. He had to remain calm, no matter how unfair this situation was. "I would like to speak with your supervisor," Marcus said clearly. "I'm not trying to cause any problems. I just want to board the flight I paid for." "The gate is closed," Karen announced, even though passengers were still boarding behind her at the other podium. "The gate is clearly not closed," said the elderly woman who had spoken up before. That young lady right there just scanned someone's pass 10 seconds ago. Karen's jaw tightened. She picked up a phone and made a call, turning her back to Marcus and the growing crowd. When she hung up, she said, "A supervisor is on the way. You can speak with them, but you're not getting on this flight." Marcus stood there, feeling dozens of eyes on him. He had given speeches to thousands of people. He had been interviewed on national television. He had sat across from presidents and prime ministers. But standing at this gate, being treated like a criminal for trying to board a plane, he felt small and powerless. A security officer arrived within minutes. He was a tall man with graying hair and a weathered face. He looked at Marcus, then at Karen, then at the crowd of passengers. "What seems to be the problem here?" the officer asked. Karen jumped in before Marcus could speak. "This passenger is trying to board with an invalid ticket, and when I informed him of the situation, he became aggressive and refused to leave the gate area." Marcus felt his blood run cold. That wasn't what happened at all, and Karen knew it. "That's not true," said the college student with his phone. "I have video of the whole thing." He was completely calm and polite. "She's the one who got aggressive." "Me too," said another passenger. "I recorded it on my phone." The security officer held up his hand. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass and identification?" Marcus handed over his phone with the boarding pass displayed and took out his passport. The officer examined both carefully. He pulled out his own phone and seemed to be checking something. "This boarding pass appears to be valid," the officer said to Karen. "It's for this flight, today's date, first class, seat 3A. "The system must not have updated," Karen said quickly. "That seat was reassigned due to overbooking. I've already explained this multiple times." "Then let's check the system together," the officer suggested. Karen hesitated. In that moment of hesitation, Marcus knew the truth. There was no system error. There was no overbooking. The only problem was the color of his skin. The crowd around them had grown larger. At least 20 passengers were now watching the scene unfold. More phones were out, recording every moment. Marcus could see some people typing on their phones, probably posting about what they were witnessing on social media. This situation was spiraling out of control, and Marcus knew that no matter what happened next, nothing would ever be quite the same. Karen looked at the security officer and then back at her computer screen. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, but she seemed to be stalling for time. The crowd of passengers continued to grow, and the atmosphere at Gate 47 had become tense and uncomfortable. "I need to call for additional security," Karen suddenly announced. She picked up her radio again and pressed the button. "This is Gate 47, I need backup. I have an aggressive passenger who is refusing to comply with crew instructions and causing a major disturbance." Marcus felt his stomach drop. The way Karen described the situation was completely wrong. He had not raised his voice once. He had not made any threatening moves. All he had done was ask questions and request to speak with a supervisor. But now Karen was painting a picture of him as dangerous and out of control. "Ma'am, that's not what's happening here," Marcus said carefully. "I haven't been aggressive at all." "Everyone here can confirm that. That's right," shouted the college student with his phone. "This is complete nonsense. He's been nothing but respectful." The businessman in the expensive suit stepped forward. "I'm an attorney and I've been watching this entire interaction. This gentleman has done absolutely nothing wrong. He has a valid ticket and has been perfectly polite." Karen's face turned even redder. "All of you need to stay back and stop interfering, or you'll be removed from your flights as well." 2 more security officers arrived, both younger than the first one. They looked at the crowd and then at Marcus. One of them, a woman with short dark hair, asked, "What's going on?" Karen spoke quickly, her words tumbling out. "This passenger attempted to board with what appears to be an invalid ticket. When I informed him he couldn't board, he became hostile and confrontational. He's been standing here arguing with me for over 15 minutes, refusing to leave the gate area. Several passengers have been harassing me and my colleague, interfering with our duties." The first security officer, who had been examining Marcus's boarding pass, spoke up. "Actually, his boarding pass appears to be completely valid. I was just asking the gate agent to check her system." Karen shot him an annoyed look. "The system shows the seat was reassigned. Obviously, there's been some kind of error, but that doesn't give him the right to cause a scene and intimidate airline staff." "I haven't intimidated anyone," Marcus said, his voice steady but firm. "I've simply asked for an explanation about why I can't board a flight I paid for. The female security officer turned to Marcus. Sir, do you have any other identification? A driver's license or credit card? Marcus reached into his wallet and pulled out his driver's license and his platinum executive membership card from the airline. He also pulled out his Black American Express card, the kind that only people with significant wealth could obtain. He handed all three to the officer. She looked at them carefully, her eyebrows rising slightly when she saw the executive membership card. You're a platinum member? Yes, Marcus said. I fly with this airline at least twice a month. The officer looked at Karen with a puzzled expression. He's a platinum executive member. Those reservations don't get canceled or reassigned without direct contact with the member. Karen's face showed a flash of panic, but she recovered quickly. Like I said, there must be a system error. These things happen, but his behavior has been inappropriate regardless of his membership status. My behavior? Marcus asked, unable to hide his frustration anymore. I walked up to the gate with a valid ticket. You told me I couldn't board with no real explanation. I asked politely for a supervisor. What exactly about my behavior has been inappropriate? A middle-aged black woman who had been watching from a seat nearby stood up. I'll tell you what's inappropriate. I've been sitting here for 45 minutes and I watched this woman let at least a dozen white passengers board without even looking twice at their tickets. But this man shows up and suddenly there's a problem. We all know what this is really about. Several passengers murmured in agreement. The college student held his phone higher. This is going straight to Twitter. Everyone needs to see this. Put that phone down, Karen shouted, losing her composure completely. You're not allowed to film airline personnel without permission. Actually, we're in a public area of the airport, the attorney passenger said calmly. These people have every right to film what's happening. The first security officer, who seemed to be the ranking one, held up his hands. Everyone, let's just calm down. Ma'am, he said to Karen, can you please check your system and verify whether this seat is actually available or not? Karen typed on her keyboard, her fingers shaking slightly. The seconds stretched out. Finally, she said, the system is running slowly. It's going to take a few minutes to refresh. That's convenient, someone in the crowd muttered. Marcus glanced at his watch. The flight was scheduled to depart in 30 minutes. Even if this got resolved, they were wasting valuable time. He had an important meeting in London, and missing this flight would create serious problems. While we're waiting for the system, Marcus said, can someone explain to me what initially made you think my boarding pass was invalid? It has all the correct information. Flight number, date, time, seat assignment, and my name. Karen didn't answer. She just kept staring at her computer screen. The female security officer looked uncomfortable. Sir, I think we should step over to the side and— No, Marcus interrupted, his voice firm but not angry. With all respect, I'm not going anywhere until this is resolved. I've done nothing wrong, and I'm not going to be led away like I'm some kind of criminal while other passengers board the flight that I'm supposed to be on. At that moment, another passenger approached the gate. He was a white man in his 50s wearing jeans and a casual shirt. He held up his phone to the other gate agent, who smiled and scanned his boarding pass without any questions. The man walked onto the jet bridge. Did you see that? The elderly woman who had first spoken up asked loudly. That man just boarded with no problems at all. This is absolutely ridiculous. More passengers pulled out their phones and started recording. Marcus could see some of them typing frantically, probably posting updates on social media. This situation was getting bigger by the minute, and he knew it was only going to get worse. A voice came over Karen's radio. Gate 47, this is operations. We're showing the flight is ready for departure. What's your status? Karen picked up the radio, her hand trembling. We have a situation at the gate. We need a supervisor and possibly police backup. Police? Marcus said, his voice rising for the first time. You're calling the police because I tried to board a flight with a valid ticket? You're being disruptive, Karen said, her voice shaking. You're making our other passengers uncomfortable and preventing us from completing the boarding process. The only person making people uncomfortable is you, said the black woman who had spoken earlier. Everyone here can see what's really going on. The businessman attorney pulled out his own business card and handed it to Marcus. Sir, I don't know who you are, but if you need legal representation after this is over, please call my office. I'm willing to testify about everything I've witnessed here today. So am I, said the college student. Me too, added the elderly woman. More voices joined in, offering to be witnesses. Marcus felt overwhelmed. These strangers, people he had never met before, were standing up for him. They saw the injustice happening and weren't staying silent. Karen's radio crackled again. "Gate 47, your supervisor is en route." "Eat at 2 minutes, finally," Marcus thought. Someone with authority would arrive and straighten this mess out. He took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. The security officers stood nearby, looking uncertain about what to do. The crowd of passengers continued to grow, with some people even pulling out their laptops to record video. Marcus noticed a young woman, maybe in her 20s, standing at the edge of the crowd. She was staring at him with a strange expression, like she recognized him but couldn't place where from. Suddenly her eyes went wide. She pulled out her phone and typed something quickly, then looked up at Marcus again. Then she turned to the people around her and said in a loud, clear voice, "Oh my God. Do you guys know who this is? That's Marcus Wellington, the tech billionaire. He was on the cover of Forbes last month." The crowd went silent for a moment, and then the noise level exploded. People started whispering and pointing. More phones came out. The college student looked at his phone screen, then at Marcus, his mouth hanging open. "Holy shit," the student breathed. "She's right. Dude, you're worth like $3 billion. Karen's face went completely white. She stared at Marcus with horror, finally understanding exactly who she had been refusing to let board. The security officers exchanged uncomfortable glances, but Marcus just stood there quietly, his face showing no expression. Because in that moment he realized something important. His wealth, his success, his face on magazine covers. None of it had protected him from this. He was still a black man in America, and that meant he could still be treated as suspicious, as dangerous, as someone who didn't belong in first class. And now, with dozens of phones recording and people posting about it online, the whole world was about to see it too. The atmosphere at Gate 47 changed completely in those few seconds after Marcus's identity was revealed. Karen looked like she might faint. She grabbed the edge of the podium to steady herself, her face changing from red to pale white. The security officers shifted uncomfortably, clearly realizing they were now part of a situation that was much bigger than they had thought. Marcus remained calm, though his mind was racing. He had not wanted this to become about who he was or how much money he had. He had simply wanted to be treated like any other passenger with a valid ticket. But now that people knew his identity, everything was different. The phones recording him multiplied. He could hear people frantically typing on their devices, probably posting updates to social media. "That's really him," someone whispered. "Marcus Wellington. I read an article about him just last week. He started his company in his garage and now it's worth billions. Didn't he just donate like $50 million to build schools in underserved communities?" Another passenger asked. "Yeah," someone else confirmed. "He's one of the richest black men in America." A woman in a business suit hurried over to the gate area. She wore a dark blue airline uniform with several pins on her lapel, indicating she was a supervisor. Her name tag read, "Jennifer Hayes, Gate Supervisor." She looked around at the crowd, the security officers, and then at Karen with a concerned expression. "What's going on here?" Jennifer asked, her voice professional but urgent. Karen started to speak, but her voice cracked. There was a passenger who..." "The system showed..." "Ma'am," Marcus said, stepping forward with his boarding pass still displayed on his phone. "My name is Marcus Wellington. I arrived at this gate to board my flight to London. I have a confirmed first-class ticket, Seat 3A. This gate agent informed me that my seat had been reassigned due to overbooking. When I asked for clarification, she became hostile and called security, claiming I was being aggressive and disruptive. Multiple passengers here have been recording the entire interaction and can confirm that I remained polite and calm throughout." Jennifer looked at his phone, then at Karen. "Let me see the reservation system." She moved behind the podium and typed rapidly on the keyboard. Her eyebrows drew together as she read the screen. She clicked several more times, reading carefully. Then she looked up at Karen with an expression that was hard to read. "There is no overbooking on this flight," Jennifer said slowly. "We have 3 empty seats in first class. Seat 3A is one of them, and it's been assigned to Marcus Wellington for the past 3 weeks. The reservation was never changed, canceled, or reassigned." The crowd gasped. Karen opened her mouth, but no words came out. "So you're telling me," the attorney passenger said loudly, "that this man was prevented from boarding a flight, had security called on him, and was publicly humiliated, all because of what exactly? What was the real reason? Jennifer looked at Karen, waiting for an answer. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Finally, she stammered, I thought. He just didn't seem like. I was trying to look out for. Look out for what? Jennifer asked, her voice sharp now. There are protocols, Karen said desperately. When passengers seem suspicious or like they don't fit the profile of. She stopped talking abruptly, realizing what she was about to say. But it was too late. Everyone had heard enough to understand exactly what she meant. The profile, Marcus said quietly. What profile is that exactly? The profile of someone who belongs in first class? Karen looked down, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The college student with his phone spoke up. I got all of that on video. She just basically admitted she racially profiled him. Jennifer's face was tight with anger, but she maintained her professional composure. Mr. Wellington, on behalf of the airline, I want to offer my deepest apologies. This should never have happened. Your ticket is completely valid, and you are absolutely welcome to board this flight. I will personally escort you to your seat. An apology isn't enough, the elderly woman said firmly. This young woman needs to be fired. This is discrimination, plain and simple. Several passengers voiced their agreement. The crowd had grown to at least 40 people now, and more were stopping to see what was happening. Marcus could see other gate agents from nearby gates watching with shocked expressions. I assure you this matter will be investigated thoroughly, Jennifer said. Ms. Mitchell, you need to come with me right now. You're being removed from this gate immediately. But the flight, Karen started. Another agent will handle the boarding. Jennifer cut her off. You're done here. Go to the operations office and wait for me there. Karen looked like she wanted to argue, but one look at Jennifer's face told her it was pointless. She grabbed her bag from under the podium and walked away quickly, her head down. Several passengers booed as she left. Others shouted things like, shame on you, and you should be fired. 2 airport police officers arrived, drawn by the commotion. Jennifer quickly explained the situation to them while Marcus stood quietly, watching everything unfold. He felt strange, disconnected from it all. This was really happening. In 2025, with all the progress that had supposedly been made, he had just been racially profiled at an airport gate in front of dozens of witnesses. Mr. Wellington, Jennifer said, turning back to him. Again, I cannot apologize enough. Please let me escort you to your seat. We'll also be upgrading your return flight at no charge, and I'll make sure our customer service team follows up with you personally. I don't want an upgrade, Marcus said quietly. I just want to know that this won't happen to someone else, someone who doesn't have the resources or platform that I have, someone who might have just accepted being turned away because they were too afraid to argue. Jennifer nodded solemnly. I understand, and I promise you this will be taken very seriously. The crowd began to part, creating a path for Marcus to board. As he walked toward the jet bridge, passengers reached out to shake his hand or pat his shoulder. Several people said things like, good for you for standing up and we've got your back. The young woman who had first recognized him stepped forward. Mr. Wellington, I'm so sorry this happened to you. I'm actually a journalism student. Would you be willing to talk to me about this experience? I think people need to hear your story. Marcus paused. Give me your contact information. I'll think about it. She quickly wrote her name and email on a piece of paper and handed it to him. As Marcus continued toward the jet bridge, he could hear people behind him already talking about what they had witnessed. Many were still recording on their phones, probably live streaming or posting to social media. Jennifer walked with him onto the plane. The flight crew at the door looked confused by the supervisor's presence, and even more confused when they saw the security officers following behind. Jennifer spoke quietly to the head flight attendant, explaining the situation. The head flight attendant, an older man with kind eyes, looked horrified. He turned to Marcus. Sir, I am so deeply sorry. Please know that this does not represent who we are as a crew or as an airline. Marcus just nodded. He was exhausted, emotionally drained from the experience. All he wanted was to sit down and try to process what had just happened. Jennifer escorted him to seat 3A. It was a luxurious first-class seat, exactly as he had booked it. She helped him stow his briefcase in the overhead bin. Mr. Wellington, she said quietly, I know words aren't enough right now, but I want you to know that I will personally ensure this is investigated. I've been with this airline for 18 years and I am ashamed that something like this happened on my watch. How many other times has it happened? Marcus asked. How many times when there weren't cameras recording and someone didn't recognize the passenger? How many people has that woman turned away? And how many times did your airline's investigation find nothing wrong? Jennifer had no answer for that. She just looked at him with sad, guilty eyes. As she left the plane, Marcus sat down in his seat and closed his eyes. Other first-class passengers were boarding now, and he could feel their eyes on him. Some looked curious, others sympathetic. A few looked uncomfortable, probably upset that there had been drama before their flight. Marcus pulled out his phone and saw that he had dozens of missed calls and text messages. News traveled fast. His assistant had texted him, "Boss, are you okay? There are videos all over Twitter about something happening at the airport. People are saying it's you." He typed back, "I'm fine. On the plane now. We'll talk when I land." But Marcus knew he wasn't fine. He was angry, hurt, and frustrated. He was also determined. This wasn't going to be swept under the rug. Too many people had seen what happened. Too many phones had recorded it. The truth was out there now, spreading across the internet at lightning speed. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Marcus looked out the window at the terminal. Somewhere in there, Karen Mitchell was probably sitting in an office realizing that her actions had consequences. But Marcus knew this was bigger than one prejudiced gate agent. This was about a system that allowed these things to happen. A system that saw a successful black man and assumed he didn't belong. The plane began to taxi toward the runway, and Marcus made a decision. He wasn't going to stay silent about this. He had a platform, resources, and a voice that could reach millions. Marcus had barely been in the air for an hour when his phone started going crazy. Even with airplane Wi-Fi, the notifications kept pouring in. Text messages, emails, missed calls, social media mentions. They were coming in so fast that his phone couldn't keep up. He had turned off most of his notifications, but even then, he could see the numbers climbing into the hundreds, then thousands. He opened Twitter and immediately saw why. The hashtag boarding gate bias was trending at #1 worldwide, not just in the United States, but everywhere. Over 5 million people had already viewed posts about what happened at Gate 47. The videos that passengers had recorded were being shared, reshared, and commented on by thousands of people every minute. Marcus watched one of the videos. It was strange seeing himself from someone else's perspective. The video showed him standing calmly at the gate, his voice quiet and respectful, while Karen became increasingly agitated. You could hear other passengers defending him. You could see the moment when the college student announced his identity. The video had been viewed over 2 million times in just the past hour. The comments were overwhelming. Thousands of people were sharing their own stories of discrimination while traveling. Black passengers, Latino passengers, Muslim passengers, Asian passengers, so many people had experienced something similar. Some stories were worse than his. People talked about being pulled aside for random searches over and over again. They shared experiences of being followed through airport shops by security. They described being moved from their paid seats to make room for white passengers. "This is America," one person wrote. "It doesn't matter if you're a billionaire or a janitor. If you're black, you're automatically suspicious." "I've been flying for 30 years, another comment read, "and I've been randomly selected for additional screening on almost every single flight. My white husband has never been selected once. Not once in 30 years. But there were also hateful comments. Marcus scrolled through messages from people who accused him of playing the race card, of making something out of nothing, of being too sensitive. Some people said he probably was acting suspicious and the gate agent was just doing her job. Others claimed the whole thing was staged for publicity. One message particularly bothered him. "Maybe if you dressed better and acted more professional, people wouldn't question you. You probably looked like you were in the wrong place." Marcus looked down at his clothes. He was wearing a custom-tailored suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. His shoes were Italian leather. His watch was a limited edition piece worth more than a luxury car. How exactly was he supposed to dress to not look suspicious? His phone rang. It was his publicist, Sarah Chen, he answered. "Marcus, thank God," Sarah said, talking fast. "Are you okay?" "Every major news outlet is trying to reach you. CNN, NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox News, BBC. Everyone wants an interview. And that's just the traditional media. Online journalists, podcasters, YouTubers, my inbox has literally crashed twice." "I'm okay," Marcus said. "Still processing everything. The airline's CEO has been trying to call you," Sarah continued. "They want to meet with you as soon as you land." They're talking about a private settlement, a generous one. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. A private settlement, so they can make this go away quietly. That's my guess, Sarah said. Look, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But we need to think strategically about how you want to handle this. This story isn't going away. You need to decide what you want to say and how you want to say it. I'll call you when I land, Marcus said. I need some time to think. After hanging up, Marcus opened his laptop and started reading news articles about the incident. The stories were everywhere. Major newspapers had already published pieces. Cable news channels were discussing it between segments. Social media influencers were making videos about it. One article from a major newspaper included a statement from the airline. We are deeply sorry for the experience Mr. Wellington had at our gate today. We do not tolerate discrimination of any kind, and we are conducting a thorough investigation into this matter. The employee involved has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of our investigation. Administrative leave. Not fired, not even suspended, just placed on leave while they investigated. Marcus did some research on Karen Mitchell. It wasn't hard to find information. Other passengers and airline employees were already talking about her online. What he discovered made him even angrier. This wasn't Karen's first complaint. It wasn't even her second or third. Over the past 5 years, she had received at least 7 formal complaints from passengers. 6 of those complaints were from passengers of color, who claimed they had been treated unfairly or with suspicion. Each time, the airline had investigated and found the complaints to be unsubstantiated or the result of misunderstandings. One complaint from 2 years ago was particularly detailed. A black doctor traveling to a medical conference had been questioned extensively by Karen about whether his first-class ticket was really his. She had demanded to see additional identification, asked him where he worked, and questioned how he could afford a first-class ticket. The doctor had filed a formal complaint, but the airline sided with Karen, saying she was following security protocols. Marcus felt sick reading these stories. How many people had Karen treated this way? How many people had been humiliated, questioned, and made to feel like they didn't belong? And how many other airline employees were doing the same thing at gates across the country? His phone buzzed with a call from his mother. He answered immediately. "Baby, are you all right?" His mother asked, her voice tight with worry. "I just saw the videos. I've been calling and calling." "I'm fine, Mom," Marcus said, though his voice betrayed his emotions. It was humiliating. "I know, baby. I know." His mother's voice was soft and sad. It was the same voice she had used when he was a teenager and had been followed around a store by security. The same voice from when he was in college and had been pulled over by police for driving suspiciously in a nice neighborhood. She had comforted him through so many of these experiences over the years. "You worked so hard to get where you are," she continued. "You built an incredible company. You've helped so many people, and they still treated you like a criminal." "Yeah," Marcus said quietly. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but I'm not going to stay quiet about it." "Good," his mother said firmly. "You have a voice that people will listen to. Use it. Make something positive come from this ugliness." After talking to his mother, Marcus spent the rest of the flight thinking. He read through hundreds of messages from supporters. He looked at photos and videos from the incident from multiple angles. He researched statistics about discrimination in air travel. The numbers were staggering. Studies showed that passengers of color were significantly more likely to be questioned, searched, and removed from flights than white passengers. By the time the plane landed in London, Marcus had made his decision. He wasn't going to take the airline's private settlement. He wasn't going to quietly accept their apology and move on. This was bigger than him, and it was time to do something about it. He called Sarah as soon as he got off the plane. "I want to hold a press conference," he said. "When?" Sarah asked. "As soon as possible. Tomorrow, if we can arrange it." "Marcus, are you sure? Once you go public with this, there's no taking it back. The airline is offering you a lot of money to keep this private." "I don't want their money," Marcus said firmly. "I want change. Real change. And that's not going to happen if we handle this behind closed doors." "Okay," Sarah said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "Let's do it. I'll start making calls." Marcus checked into his hotel and immediately opened his laptop. He began writing notes for what he wanted to say at the press conference. But he also started working on something bigger, An idea had been forming in his mind during the flight, and now he was ready to make it real. He called his chief financial officer and his legal team. They talked for over 2 hours, working out the details. By the time Marcus finally went to bed, exhausted and emotionally drained, he had created the framework for something that could actually make a difference. Before he fell asleep, Marcus checked Twitter one more time. The boarding gate bias hashtag was still trending. More videos and stories were being shared. More people were speaking up about their experiences. The conversation was growing, spreading, becoming impossible to ignore. And Marcus knew that tomorrow, he was going to add fuel to that fire. He was going to use his platform, his resources, and his voice to make sure that something good came from this terrible experience. He was going to make sure that what happened to him at Gate 47 would be remembered not just as another example of discrimination, but as a turning point that led to real change. He fell asleep with his phone still buzzing with notifications, the screen lighting up his dark hotel room again and again, like a beacon calling for justice in the darkness. The conference room at the London hotel was packed with journalists. News crews from every major network had set up cameras. Reporters from newspapers, magazines, and online publications sat with notebooks and recording devices ready. The room was designed to hold maybe 50 people, but there were at least 80 crammed inside, with more standing in the hallway outside. Marcus stood backstage with Sarah, adjusting his tie and taking deep breaths. He had given hundreds of presentations and speeches before. He had pitched his company to tough investors. He had testified before Congress about technology issues. But this felt different. This was personal. This was about something that went beyond business or technology. This was about dignity, respect, and justice. You ready? Sarah asked. Marcus nodded. As ready as I'll ever be. The airline's CEO has been calling nonstop, Sarah said. They're practically begging you not to do this. They've increased their settlement offer 3 times. How much are they offering now? Marcus asked, curious despite himself. $20 million plus a public apology, plus a commitment to diversity training. Marcus shook his head. That's not enough. Money doesn't fix this. Training sessions that people forget about in a week don't fix this. We need real systemic change. Sarah smiled. That's what I told them. They weren't happy. A hotel staff member gave them the signal. It was time. Marcus walked out onto the small stage that had been set up. Camera flashes went off like lightning. Reporters shouted questions all at once, creating a wall of noise. Marcus held up his hand and waited for the room to quiet down. Thank you all for coming, he began, his voice steady and clear. I know many of you are here because you saw videos of what happened to me at the airport 2 days ago. You saw me being prevented from boarding a flight I had paid for. You saw me being treated as suspicious, as someone who didn't belong in first class, despite having a valid ticket and being a platinum executive member of that airline. He paused, looking around the room. Every eye was on him. But I'm not here today as a billionaire who was inconvenienced. I'm not here as a CEO who had a bad customer service experience. I'm here as a black man who, despite achieving what many would call the American dream, still faced the reality that in America, the color of my skin can make people see me as a threat, rather than a customer. The room was completely silent except for the click of cameras. The airline has offered me a substantial sum of money to settle this matter privately, Marcus continued. They've offered apologies and promises of training, and I'm sure their legal team is very nervous about what I might say today. But I'm not interested in their money. I'm not interested in a private settlement that allows this to be swept under the rug. He pulled a piece of paper from his jacket pocket and unfolded it. After what happened to me, I started doing research. I found out that the gate agent who profiled me had received at least 7 previous complaints about discriminatory behavior. 7 complaints, and she was still working, still treating passengers poorly, still making people feel unwelcome. The system protected her. The system failed the passengers she mistreated. Marcus looked directly into the cameras. I also found thousands of stories from other people who have experienced similar discrimination while traveling. Black passengers questioned about whether their tickets are really theirs. Muslim passengers subjected to extra searches. Latino passengers asked for additional documentation. Asian passengers treated as foreigners even though they're American citizens. The stories are endless and they're heartbreaking. He put the paper down and spoke from the heart. Many people have asked me how I stayed so calm during the incident, how I didn't get angry or raise my voice. The truth is, I've had practice. I've been dealing with this my entire life. When I was a teenager, I was followed in stores. When I was in college, I was pulled over by police for no reason. When I became successful, people assumed I was an athlete or entertainer, because how else could a young black man afford nice things? His voice grew stronger, more passionate. I learned early that if I showed any anger, any frustration, I would be labeled as aggressive. I would be seen as dangerous. So I learned to stay calm, to speak softly, to make myself smaller and less threatening. And that's exhausting. It's exhausting to have to think about how every move, every word, every expression might be interpreted. It's exhausting to know that you have to be twice as good, twice as polite, twice as careful as everyone else just to be treated equally. A reporter raised her hand. Marcus nodded to her. Mr. Wellington, what do you want to happen now? What would satisfy you? Marcus smiled. I'm glad you asked. Because I'm not just here to talk about the problem. I'm here to announce a solution. Or at least the beginning of one. He gestured to the large screen behind him, which lit up with his presentation. Today, I am announcing the creation of the Equal Skies Initiative. I am personally committing $50 million to this fund. The goal is simple: to combat racial bias in the travel industry and support victims of discrimination. The room erupted with noise as reporters shouted questions. Marcus held up his hand again. Let me explain what this initiative will do. First, we will provide legal support and representation to any passenger who experiences discrimination while traveling. Too many people can't afford to fight back when they're mistreated. They take the loss, accept the humiliation, and move on because they don't have resources. We're going to change that. He clicked to the next slide. Second, we will partner with civil rights organizations to push for new federal regulations regarding discrimination in air travel. We want mandatory reporting of discrimination complaints. We want independent oversight committees. We want accountability measures that actually work. Another slide appeared. Third, we will work directly with airlines to develop and implement genuine anti-bias training programs. Not the kind of training that checks a box and gets forgotten. Real training that changes culture, that changes how people think and act. He looked around the room. Fourth, we will create a public database where passengers can report their experiences with discrimination. Too often, these incidents happen in isolation. People don't realize that the flight attendant who racially profiled them has done it to dozens of other people. This database will shine a light on patterns of behavior and hold individuals and companies accountable. The room was buzzing with energy. Reporters were typing frantically on their laptops. Cameras were rolling. Finally, Marcus said, we will support research into the psychological and economic impacts of discrimination in travel. We need hard data, solid studies that show the real cost of bias, not just to individuals, but to society. He took a breath. Some people might ask why I'm doing this. After all, I'm rich. I can afford to fly private. I never have to deal with commercial airlines again if I don't want to. But that's exactly why I have to do this. Because I have the resources, the platform, and the privilege to make change happen. And if I don't use those things to help others, then what's the point of having them? A reporter from CNN raised her hand. Mr. Wellington, the airline has said they're investigating the incident. Are you satisfied with their response? Marcus shook his head. No, I'm not. Investigation isn't enough. I've learned that the gate agent who profiled me has been investigated before, multiple times, and nothing changed. Investigation without action is just window dressing. It's a way for companies to look like they care without actually doing anything. What do you want to see happen to the gate agent? Another reporter asked. That's not for me to decide, Marcus said. But I will say this. One person being fired doesn't solve the problem. This isn't about one bad employee. This is about systems and cultures that allow discrimination to happen and continue happening. That's what we need to change. A reporter from a major British newspaper spoke up. You mentioned that the airline offered you $20 million to settle privately. Some people might say that by refusing that money and going public, you're costing the airline harm and affecting their employees and shareholders. What do you say to that? Marcus met the reporter's eyes directly. I say that the airline harmed itself by allowing discriminatory behavior to continue unchecked for years. I say that shareholders should be concerned about investing in companies that don't take discrimination seriously. And I say that the employees who are doing their jobs with respect and professionalism have nothing to worry about. The only people who should be concerned are those who think it's acceptable to treat passengers differently based on the color of their skin. Another reporter jumped in. There are already some people on social media saying you're playing the victim, that you're using your race for publicity. How do you respond to that? Marcus had expected this question. He had seen those comments online. First, let me be clear, I didn't ask to be racially profiled. I didn't go to that airport looking for a confrontation. I simply tried to board a flight I had paid for. The fact that some people think speaking up about discrimination is playing the victim says a lot about how normalized these behaviors have become. He leaned forward slightly. And to those who think I'm doing this for publicity, I'm a billionaire CEO. I'm already well known. The kind of publicity I got from this incident is not the kind anyone would want. Being humiliated at an airport gate, having security called on me, being treated like a criminal in front of dozens of people, that's not the kind of attention that helps my business or my reputation. The only reason I'm speaking up is because I have the ability to do so, and staying silent would be a betrayal of all the people who experience this but don't have a platform. The questions continued for another 45 minutes. Marcus answered each one honestly and directly. He talked about his own experiences with discrimination. He acknowledged the progress that had been made while pointing out how much work remained. He called out specific airlines and travel companies by name when reporters asked about industry-wide problems. Finally, Sarah stepped forward and announced that would be the last question. A young reporter from an online news site asked, "Mr. Wellington, what message do you have for other people of color who face discrimination while traveling?" Marcus thought for a moment before answering. "I want them to know that they're not alone, that what they're experiencing is real, not imagined, that they have the right to be treated with dignity and respect, and that there are people fighting for them, working to make things better." He paused. "But I also want to be honest. Change doesn't happen overnight. The Equal Skies initiative isn't going to solve every problem immediately. There will still be biased gate agents. There will still be discriminatory treatment. But every time someone speaks up, every time we refuse to accept mistreatment as normal, we move one step closer to a world where everyone can travel freely and safely, without fear of being judged by the color of their skin." As Marcus left the stage, reporters rushed forward still shouting questions, but he felt good about what he had said. He had told his truth. He had announced real action, not just empty words, and he had used his platform to amplify the voices of countless others who had similar experiences. Within an hour, clips from the press conference were everywhere. The announcement of the Equal Skies initiative was the top story on every news channel. Social media exploded with reactions. Some people praised Marcus for taking a stand. Others criticized him for being too harsh on the airline. But everyone was talking about it. Everyone was forced to confront the reality of discrimination in travel, and that, Marcus thought, was exactly the point. The conversation had begun. Now came the hard work of turning that conversation into real, lasting change. 3 months had passed since the incident at Gate 47. Marcus sat in his office, looking out at the city skyline, reflecting on everything that had changed. His desk was covered with reports, letters, and proposals. The Equal Skies initiative had grown far beyond what he had originally imagined. The immediate aftermath of the press conference had been intense. The airline's stock price had dropped by 12% in a single day. Their CEO had been forced to hold his own press conference, announcing immediate reforms and apologizing again to Marcus and to any other passengers who had experienced discrimination. But Marcus had been skeptical. He had heard corporate apologies before, and he knew they didn't always lead to real change. The investigation into Karen Mitchell had concluded within 2 weeks. The airline had found evidence of a pattern of discriminatory behavior spanning her entire 7-year career with the company. In addition to the 7 formal complaints Marcus had discovered, investigators found dozens of informal complaints that had never been officially recorded. Passengers had called customer service, sent emails, and written letters, but their concerns had been dismissed or ignored. Karen was terminated from her position. She tried to sue the airline for wrongful termination, claiming she was a scapegoat, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. Multiple passengers came forward to testify about their experiences with her. Videos from security cameras showed her treating passengers of color differently than white passengers. Her lawsuit was dismissed, But Marcus had been right when he said the problem was bigger than one person. As the Equal Skies initiative began its work, they discovered that Karen's behavior was not unique. The public database they created for reporting discrimination incidents received over 10,000 reports in the first month alone. The stories were heartbreaking and infuriating. A black doctor was removed from a flight because another passenger felt uncomfortable sitting next to him. A Muslim woman was forced to remove her hijab for additional screening, even though that violated TSA guidelines. A Latino family was questioned extensively about their citizenship status, despite being born in the United States. An Asian American businessman was told his seat had been given away, only to watch a white passenger with a later boarding group take the seat minutes later. The database revealed patterns that were impossible to ignore. Certain airlines had significantly higher rates of discrimination complaints. Certain airports had worse track records than others, and the data showed that people of color were 3 times more likely to be removed from flights, 5 times more likely to be subjected to additional screening, and 7 times more likely to be questioned about their tickets than white passengers. Marcus had presented this data to Congress. He testified before a committee on transportation and civil rights, sharing stories from the database and pushing for new federal regulations. The testimony went viral, with millions of people watching the video online. Lawmakers from both parties expressed concern and promised action, and surprisingly, action actually came. Congress passed the Fair Travel Act, which required all airlines to report discrimination complaints to a federal oversight committee. The law also mandated quarterly bias training for all airline and airport personnel, with independent verification that the training was actually happening. Airlines that failed to comply faced significant fines. Those with persistent patterns of discrimination could lose federal contracts and face additional penalties. The Equal Skies initiative had also partnered with 5 major airlines to completely redesign their anti-bias training programs. Instead of boring videos that employees could ignore, the new training involved real scenarios, difficult conversations, and accountability measures. Employees had to pass regular assessments to prove they understood the material. Their performance was tracked, and patterns of biased behavior would trigger automatic reviews. Marcus had hired a team of 20 people to run the initiative full-time. They provided free legal representation to passengers who faced discrimination. In the past 3 months, they had taken on 47 cases. Some were settled out of court, with passengers receiving compensation and airlines agreeing to policy changes. Others were going to trial, sending a message that discrimination would no longer be quietly swept away. The initiative had also funded 3 major research studies at universities, examining the psychological impact of travel discrimination, the economic cost to the travel industry, and the effectiveness of different intervention strategies. Early results were already being published in academic journals, providing the kind of hard data that policymakers needed to make informed decisions. But perhaps the most meaningful work was happening on a smaller, more personal level. The initiative had created a support network for people who had experienced discrimination while traveling. It was a community where people could share their stories, find validation, and get practical advice on how to handle future situations. The network had grown to over 50,000 members in 3 months. Marcus read through some of the messages on the network's forum. One was from a young black woman who had been questioned about her first-class ticket. Thanks to the training and resources from the Equal Skies initiative, she had calmly documented the interaction, filed a formal complaint, and received an apology from the airline along with compensation. She wrote, "I used to just accept this kind of treatment because I thought there was nothing I could do. Now I know my rights and I know I'm not alone." Another message was from an elderly Asian man who had been traveling for business for 30 years. He described being stopped for additional screening on almost every flight. He had always thought it was just bad luck. But after joining the network and reading other people's stories, he realized it was a pattern of discrimination. He had filed complaints about his past experiences, and several airlines had reached out to apologize and investigate. Marcus's phone buzzed with a call from Sarah. He answered. "You're not going to believe this," she said, excitement in her voice. "Remember that journalism student who asked to interview you at the airport?" Vaguely, Marcus said. "Why?" She wrote an investigative piece for her university paper about discrimination in air travel. It got picked up by a major national newspaper, and now it's been nominated for a Student Journalism Award. She's giving you credit for inspiring her to pursue the story. Marcus smiled. That's great. Send her a congratulations message from me. Already done, Sarah said. But there's more. Her article has sparked similar investigations at other student newspapers and journalism programs across the country. We're seeing a whole new generation of journalists taking this issue seriously. After hanging up, Marcus returned to the reports on his desk. One was from the airline where the incident had occurred. They had completed their reforms: a new zero-tolerance policy for discrimination, an independent oversight committee that reviewed all complaints, and a commitment to transparency. They had published their discrimination complaint statistics publicly for the first time in the company's history. The numbers were embarrassing, but the fact that they were being honest about the problem was a step forward. Marcus had been invited to speak at the airline's headquarters to the entire executive team and board of directors. He had accepted. During that meeting, he had been direct and honest. He told them that policies on paper meant nothing if they weren't enforced. He told them that diversity training was worthless if it wasn't accompanied by real accountability. And he told them that passengers of color were watching and would remember how the airline responded to this crisis. The CEO had listened carefully and promised that things would be different. Marcus was skeptical, but he was willing to give them a chance to prove it. Time would tell if their commitment was real or just another public relations move. His assistant knocked on the door and poked her head in. Mr. Wellington, you have that university commencement speech in an hour. The car is ready whenever you are. Marcus nodded. He had been invited to give the commencement address at a historically black college. It was an honor, and he had spent weeks preparing his speech. The drive to the university took 40 minutes. As Marcus reviewed his notes in the car, he thought about what he wanted to say to these young graduates. They were entering a world that was both promising and challenging. They would face obstacles because of their race, just as he had. But they would also have opportunities that previous generations could only dream of. The ceremony was held in a large outdoor stadium. Thousands of graduates sat in neat rows wearing their caps and gowns. Their families filled the stands, cheering and waving signs. The energy was electric, full of hope and celebration. When it was Marcus's turn to speak, he walked to the podium and looked out at the sea of faces. He took a deep breath and began. Graduates, faculty, family, and friends, thank you for having me here today. When I was invited to give this speech, I was honored, but I was also nervous. What could I possibly say that would be meaningful on such an important day in your lives? He paused, making eye contact with different sections of the audience. Then I realized that the best thing I could do is tell you the truth. The truth about success, about challenges, and about the responsibility that comes with achievement. Marcus told them about his journey. Building his company from nothing, facing rejection and doubt, working endless hours to prove himself. He told them about reaching the pinnacle of success, being recognized as one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the world. And then he told them about standing at gate 47, being treated like he didn't belong despite having done everything right. I'm telling you this not to discourage you, he said, but to prepare you, because the truth is that success doesn't shield you from discrimination. Wealth doesn't protect you from bias. Achievement doesn't guarantee respect. The world will still judge you by the color of your skin before it considers the content of your character. The audience was silent, hanging on every word. But here's the other truth. You have power. More power than you might realize. The power to speak up when you see injustice. The power to support others who are facing discrimination. The power to use whatever platform or resources you have to make the world better. Marcus told them about the Equal Skies initiative. He shared statistics about how many people it had helped, how many policies had been changed, and how many conversations it had started. I didn't plan to become a civil rights advocate, he said. I just wanted to catch a flight. But sometimes life puts you in situations where you have to make a choice. You can stay silent and accept injustice, or you can speak up and work for change. I chose to speak up, and it's been one of the most important decisions of my life. He looked directly at the graduates. You will face moments like this in your careers. Moments where speaking up feels risky or uncomfortable. Moments where it would be easier to stay quiet. And you'll have to decide what kind of person you want to be. Do you want to be someone who witnesses injustice and does nothing? Or do you want to be someone who uses their voice, their skills, and their resources to make things better? Marcus talked about the responsibility that comes with education and opportunity. He acknowledged that not everyone would become billionaires or have huge platforms, but everyone had some kind of influence, some sphere where they could make a difference. Maybe you'll become a teacher who makes sure every student feels valued and respected. Maybe you'll become a manager who creates a workplace where discrimination isn't tolerated. Maybe you'll become a parent who raises children to see people as individuals, not stereotypes. Whatever you do, wherever you go, you have the power to create change. He concluded his speech with a challenge. The world you're entering is flawed. It's unjust in many ways, but it's also full of possibility. And you have the education, the talent, and the determination to make it better. Don't wait for someone else to fix the problems. Don't assume that because you're young or because you're just starting out that you can't make a difference. Every movement for justice in history has been driven by people who refused to accept the way things were and fought for the way things should be. The graduates and their families erupted in applause. Marcus stood at the podium, looking out at all those young, hopeful faces, and he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: genuine optimism about the future. After the ceremony, dozens of graduates came up to him. They shared their own stories of discrimination and thanked him for speaking out. Some told him they wanted to work for the Equal Skies initiative. Others said they were inspired to start similar projects in their own communities. One young woman told him that his story had convinced her to pursue a law degree so she could fight discrimination cases. As Marcus drove back to his office that evening, he thought about how much had changed in just 3 months. The Equal Skies initiative was exceeding all expectations. Laws had been passed. Policies had been reformed. Thousands of people had been helped. And the conversation about discrimination in travel was now happening at the highest levels of business and government. But Marcus knew the work was far from over. Change was slow and difficult. There would still be incidents of discrimination. There would still be people who refused to see the problem or who actively worked against progress. But there were also thousands of people now fighting for justice, using the tools and resources that the initiative provided. Marcus thought about Karen Mitchell, the gate agent who had started all of this. He wondered what she was doing now, whether she had learned anything from the experience. He didn't hate her. He actually felt a strange kind of gratitude, because her actions, as hurtful and wrong as they were, had sparked something important. They had forced a conversation that needed to happen. They had exposed problems that needed to be addressed. In a way, that terrible moment at Gate 47 had become a catalyst for change. Pain had been transformed into purpose. Humiliation had been turned into advocacy. And one man's experience had become a movement that was helping countless others. As the sun set over the city, Marcus looked at the photo on his desk. It was from the press conference in London, showing him standing at the podium with determination in his eyes. Under the photo was a quote that had become the motto of the Equal Skies initiative: "Justice isn't given. It's demanded, fought for, and won." Marcus smiled. The fight was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, he felt hopeful that real change was possible, and he was determined to keep fighting until everyone, regardless of race or background, could travel freely and safely without fear of discrimination. The phone on his desk rang. It was another passenger who had experienced discrimination and needed help. Marcus picked up the call, ready to listen, ready to help, ready to continue the work that had begun 3 months ago at Gate 47, because that's what this was all about. Not revenge, not publicity, but justice. And justice, Marcus had learned, required constant vigilance, unwavering commitment, and the courage to turn personal pain into collective progress.